Okay, so again, good morning, everyone. Since this is our like next session for us to continue where we left off previously. So until now, what we learned is about like loops, and one of the loop which we learned was if loop, and within if loop, we understood two type of if loops. One is the straightforward if, including else loop, which was this, and the next one was multiple if else loop where we have like multiple if conditions, and if those not satisfied then the else condition would be executed. And that's what the example what we talked about, like where we had like if statement and we have like condition 1 provided here, then we have is another condition which is provided here, and then condition number 3. Now we will keep on evaluating each and every condition at a single time, and if at any point any one condition is true, we will execute that block of statement within it. And if that block of statement is executed, then we don't even evaluate the next set of conditions which are provided. So that's how this if else loop works. And if you go by visualization, you can see it as like a ladder. Like you start at the ladder and like it goes from step by step. Like if your first ladder, like if your first step itself is true, then you do this action which is printing, so you don't even need to go down the ladder. But if you are false, then you keep on doing the check at every stop and try to see if it's a true or false. And if it's false, then go again one more level down, and if it's false again go one more level down. And at the end, if nothing gets satisfied, then our else will be executed. So you can imagine it's like a ladder. So these covers two type of loops within if. Now the next loop what we will learn is called as while loop. So now while loop is pretty straightforward again to understand. So what it says is we will have to use this keyword called as while, and followed by while we will have is utilize a condition like these, and based on that condition we will keep on executing block of statements. So if we go by the syntax about while loop, so syntax says is you have to use a keyword called as while followed by condition. Now this condition can be in either brackets or without brackets. So that's up to us. And after our conditions are provided, we have to use this a colon, and internally, if the condition is true, what will happen is our internal block of statements would be executed, which is statement 1, then statement 2, and so on. So that is how this while loop works. So let me take this bottom. Yeah. So looking at this, how we define the while loop is while keyword followed by a user defined condition in a bracket, and then or without bracket is also possible, but that depends from condition to condition. If there are multiple conditions, then we usually just give it in a bracket for our like easy purpose to understand. But if it's just single condition, we can give it without brackets also. It works either way, followed by this colon. And if this condition is true, what we'll do is we'll keep on executing this list of statements. So now if we take an example here, right, like which will help us understand. So we have is variable a and its value is 5. Then another variable, its value is also 5. So now we have is two variables a and b, both are 5. Now I can write a condition like while a equal to b followed by colon. I will print, and in this print I will say a is equal to b. So looking at this, what we understand is if we go by the syntax, we are using a while keyword with small w, small while, followed by a condition within a bracket. And if my condition is true, what I should do is keep on executing the block of statement which is inside this while. Now, for our example, we just have a single statement. So what we do is it will keep on executing the internal statement, which is this print loop, and it will keep on printing. Now, if you see, this will keep on printing because the condition is true every time. Now, there is no wait for us to break. So in order to break, we can give one more block of statements inside, like if uh, I equal to 5, then I can write as break. And internally, or at the start, we can write I equal to 0. And internally, we can write I equal to I plus 1. So what happens is initially we are just taking this I as a counter for us. And this counter is helping us to print this statement only 5 times. Or else like this loop will keep on going in an infinite loop. And there's no way for us to terminate that loop. So in order to just terminate, what we are using is this break statement. Now how this will work is we took three variables a, b, and I, where a and b are like having values and I is acting like a counter. Now we are saying is while a is equal to b, so a and b are like 5. What we did is I equal to I plus 1, and then we are printing a is equal to b, which is the message which we want. And lastly, we'll check the value of I. Now since it was 0 and we did I equal to I plus 1, initially the value of I becomes 1 from 0. So since I is not equal to 5, we will not execute this break statement, right? Because this condition is false. So next time it will keep on executing 5 times. And when the I's value become 5, this condition becomes true and then break gets executed. Now break will do is break this whole loop of while and we will be out of the while loop. And that's where our program will stop. So the intention behind this loop was how this while loop will work. Because every time whenever we use this while loop, we have to break that loop because there is no way for us to break, right? Whereas for if else loop, we had that condition and if it's true or false, we'll keep on breaking it. So that's how this while loop works, and it's as easy as it is, like as I explained. Like there's nothing more to it, like how to utilize this while loop. And the last type of loop which we want to know is called as for loop. Now for loop is like the most frequently used loop in like all the programming languages for us. So why we need to use for loop like most of the time is because it provides us like more additional functionality within it, which can help us define conditions as well as counters like this within the loop itself, like within the brackets, as we said here, like we can provide all the conditions in there itself and we can increment also those conditions. So that's why it's like more easier for us to understand like how this for loop is and how to utilize it as well. But while loop is also been like next frequently used loop other than for loop if you want to do a mechanism. So if we go into for loop, how the syntax for loop is, syntax says like use the keyword called as for. Then after that, what we need to say is we have to utilize an object. So now this object can be user defined in a range or like a list or set or a dictionary. And we will iterate either over like range, list, set, dictionary, and we will keep on executing some statements like statement one, then statement two, and so on. So this is actually how syntax for a for loop is, where we are just important for part is like for loop, which is the keyword for us. This object is like a user defined. So this is like we need to provide what this object should be, and it is always a variable. Then this range, as we understood earlier, range is a type of a data type for us, or a list, or a set, or dictionary. So these are like data types for us, where let's say we have a list and it contains five numbers, and we want to print all the five numbers which are present in the list. So how do we print this? We can utilize this for loop. Um, for now, you might not understand clearly, like looking at the syntax, but we will go through like four examples for like one for each, and then you'll understand like how this for loop is operating. So if we take the first example, where my example number one is for range, and let's say I have a range from 1 to 10, right? So range 1 to 10 indicates internally Python is giving us numbers right from 1 to 10. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All these 10 numbers are internally generated within this range. So numbers here are like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 until 10. Okay. Now we need to print these numbers basically. Whatever this range is giving, right? Like we need to print it. Now, how do we print it? So to print these numbers, we can use for loop. Now, for we can write object as like a pointer called as I in range 1 comma 10. This is the syntax for the range, which is the comma, and I we can use it either way, followed by a colon. So what we are saying is for I will be our pointer in range 1 to 10. We just need to do is print, let's say I. If I just execute only these two statements, my output would be these numbers from 1 to 10. So this is how this for loop works on a range, where what we understood is for needs to be started with a keyword called as for, followed by a pointer which is I, and then in the range. Now range syntax is we need to provide what is the start, what is the end. Now start is 1, end is 10, and within this range we will print the values which is 1 to 10. So internally Python will give us for this range 1 to 10, and I will go over these values and print it. So what happens internally is internally for the first time i's value is 1 and it prints. Now again it goes back to for loop and increments also internally, and then I goes over 2 and again it prints. So my output would be 1 to 10 as part of this two sentences which we wrote. So that's how as easy as it is like using a for loop. Now if we move forward to a second example using a list. Now let's say I have a list called as my list, and in that list we can store like five numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now instead of this range, right, like I need to print all the numbers within this list. How do I print? So what we can use is I in for I in my list print I. So here we wrote this two sentences like more like in our English language itself. Like for I in my list, I will print whatever the values are for I. And if I execute these two sentences, my output would be 1 to 5. So here the difference is, as we said here in the syntax, for object was our like variable in list. We are picking the list from our choose. For I in my list, I need to print whatever it's present inside my list, which is I. So that's how my for loop will print internal elements within my list called as my list. Now here we need to declare this list. If we don't declare this list before executing this for loop, we will get an error. So overall, we need is these three lines of code to understand what the output is. Now the next one is for set. Set is also similar. Like let's say my set and we have his number like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now the set's advantage was like it will have all unique numbers present in it. Now here we are saying for I in my set, print I. This should print all the elements within my set. And here also we would need is these three sentences because here my set, which is this one, is required for us. So one thing what we noticed here is there is no like, if you look at this portion here, we can utilize is either four of these things like range, list, set, or dictionary. But on the left hand side, it's always going to be a common like for I in part. That thing will always be like common. Now the last one is for dictionary. Now dictionary, it would be little bit different, but it's almost similar now because how the dictionary data store is different than a list and set, right? Like because what we understood last time is my dictionary equal to, we will say like a variable a and its value is 1, then variable b value is 2, variable c value is 3, where the data has been stored in a key value format. Now I need to print both these key and values. So for that, here you are seeing we would need is two objects because we have is key as the first object and value as the second object, and we want to print both. So that's why we need to use this two objects. So instead of one object called as I, what I can say is for I comma j in my dictionary, I will do is, let's go down, for I comma j, which is my key comma value in my dictionary, I will print I comma j. So that's how it will print. Now the only additional thing we need to do for dictionary here is, including the name of the dictionary, we need to provide dot items. This is an inbuilt function provided by dictionary, which will help us provide these key values in these variables. So that's the only additional thing we need to make a note of is dot items. Now, for us to more easily understand, like instead of I and j, we can write this key comma value in my dictionary dot items. I can print as my key and value, because these objects what we declared here are like user defined, so I can write whatever I want, and I wrote as key and value because they're like more easy for us to understand. Because if we go in our normal language terms, we can say is my dictionary, it contains three key value pairs. My first pair was like a whose value is 1, b whose value is 2, and c its value is 3. Now I want to print all these three pairs. Now how do I print is for by key comma value, which is this key A, B, and C are like my keys, and 1, 2, 3 are my values in my dictionary. For key value in my dictionary dot items, I will print key value. And if I execute these three lines, my output would be like this. Key is A, value is 1. On the next line, my key is B, value is 2. And lastly, key is C, and value is 3. So in this format, my output would be shown. So that's how effective this for loop is to loop over all the data structures what we have learned until now, and which includes from range, list, set, and dictionary. And either like tuples also we can loop it over. So here we can add like tuples also, and it's as straightforward as like similar to a list. You can do it for a tuple also, and this way this for has been like used most is because it is more compatible with all other data types provided in Python, and that's why we use like for loop as like widely in Python programming. So this covers all the loops within Python. Now the additional thing other than these three loops is we can utilize combination of these three loops into one another.
So,
Mhm.
so in the dictionary, within the brace brackets, can we use the round brackets also
Uh,
or not?
this one regarding these
Yeah,
brace brackets.
yeah.
No, we cannot use a round bracket here because,
Means round brackets also, and the outer brackets will be the brace brackets, and inner is the round, like that.
oh, you mean like this,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Is it
and
possible in Python?
no, it's not possible. It will throw an error
Okay.
because as per like a dictionary syntax, what it needs is only curly brackets and not other brackets.
Mostly students are making such sort of a mistake. So students, it's for you that don't do such sort of a mistakes. Okay, while
Mhm.
practicing as well as in the exam. So that's why
Yeah. Now,
I just
mhm.
make you alert.
Yeah, now the only one exceptional case where we can use round brackets within this dictionary is only for the values. You cannot use mostly for like keys, but for values we can use the round brackets. Now, for example, here we can use round bracket
Mm-hmm.
like this. So this is allowed. Even like square brackets are also allowed for that case like this.
Okay. Square brackets means for specifying the index number or array like that.
Yeah, correct. So square bracket, if you put any number in a square bracket, that's treated like a array. Array means like a list
Okay.
within a Python. And
Mm-hmm.
here we can, now the advantage over here is if we provide this square bracket, now we can add more values. So originally what we were understanding is for this variable C, we had is only one value, which is 3. But if we imply this square bracket here, we get an option to store multiple values for C. Now that example is we can store multiple values for C like 3 equal 5, 7, like this. So now all these values which are present inside these square brackets are tagged to this value of C. Now if I execute it, my output would be this list as it is here, because we tied multiple values for this single key. That's the only advantage we can use. So this is called as like cascading of data structure. Like here we are cascading, like inserting a list inside a dictionary. So if you see this here, we have a list which is inside a dictionary. So these two data types are like combined together. And then we can again use a for loop over them and to print all the numbers however we want. So I'll just go back to our original one so that it's easier for us to understand the syntax and how it works. Okay, so that covers all the loops within Python. Now the only last theoretical part for us to understand is functions. Now functions in Python. So now just imagine whatever we have learned until now, all those conditions which we wrote using if loop, then while loop, then these for loops, and the operators what we have learned, comparison, arithmetic, then logical operators, all those using all these concepts with the help of these data types, which are like list, set, dictionary, and tuples. All these combined together can help us create programs, and those programs can be our regular computer science programs. Now, the only key point over here is function. Now, why do we need a function? Because function helps us in organizing the program, as well as it helps in like reusability. Now, function is like doing a set of task or a certain task, and we can have it like for a long lifetime. Like once we declare that function and keep all set of tasks, we can utilize that function in any other part of the system or a program where we want. So that's why function is helpful for us. So now, how do we define a function within Python? So syntax for a Python function is again like very small like previous ones. So syntax says is you need to use a keyword called as define, but instead of using whole word define, we will use this only three characters, which is def followed by function name. Now this function name is user defined. We need to provide what the function name is. And here we need to use this round brackets followed by colon and then list of statements what we want to use. So statement one, then statement two. These statements are nothing but like our print statements or any kind of logical statements which we want to write. So we can define a function using a keyword called as def, which is a short form for define, followed by a keyword which is like a user defined function name and then brackets. And after these brackets, we will provide is the colon. And here it won't act like a condition. It's like you have a function like this, and internally within this function, you have is list of statements. So this part is called as like a function definition. Here you are like defining what is that function, like what do you want in your function. So this part is called as function definition, right? And the next part, how do we call this function now, right? Like since we have created a function now, how do we call it as? We can just call it using the function name. It's as easy as it is. But the important part is we need to use is this round brackets. And this is called as function call. So this is how we define a function. And within a function, I can say like whatever task I want to do within this function, like in these statements. And then I want to call these functions. Now, additional thing is inside these brackets, I can pass parameters also, like list of parameters. And this list of parameters can be a comma separated, like A, B, C, which are my parameters. And they can go until like n parameters. You can provide n parameters. But if you have n parameters here in the function call also, we should have n parameters. And that's the rule. So let's say we have is only two parameters here in the call, then in our function definition also, it should be two so that there is no mismatch. And if you have a proper call for a function with n parameters, then our definition should also have n parameters. Then only these internal statements will be executed, which is statement one and statement two. Now, if we quickly go into example about a function, right, which will help us understand more. So let's say we have is variable a and its value is 5 and variable b its value is 10. Now we need to write a function which can add these two values. Now originally using Python what we can do is print a plus b and this will satisfy our task, right? Like it will just print whatever it is. But now here strictness is always whenever we want to add two numbers, we will have to provide these values a and b and then write these three sentences always. But using a function, what we can do is we can define a function like define add addition function name. And in this function, I need is to add two numbers, right? So I can take two parameters a and b, and then I can print a plus b. So this way I am defining a addition function. And how do I call it is I can call using this function call which we have written here. And here for the function call, we don't need to provide the colon. Now, if we execute only these four lines or three lines, we will get the answer. Now here the only missing part is we don't know what are the values of a and b which we need to provide. So how we can provide is a equal to 5 and on the next line b equal to 10. So that's how this block of code will help us add the two numbers. Now, how this whole flow is happening basically. So Python, whenever it reads this block of code, how it will work is it will try to compile your program. And while it's compiling, it will try to see if there are no syntax errors in your program. It will execute on this line first, like a equal to 5 is executed first, then b equal to 5, or b equal to 10. These two are executed and Python knows there are like two variables a and b and their values are 5 and 10. The next thing what it will do is it will get this function call. Now Python understands like, okay, there is a function call which has been made. And in this function call, it takes two variables a and b. So what Python does is it tries to find where is this function within our code and it finds over here. So how it worked is step one, it executed this, step two, and step three, it was here. And then when it identifies this call, it directly jumps from here to this line. And in this line, this function, which is addition, has been called. And in this brackets, 5 and 10 are passed. So internally, whenever this function is called, these values of a and b are also passed inside. And that's how the addition is done and print has been made. So output of this program would be 10, 50, which is 5 plus 10. So that's how this function will help us do a certain task. Now, why do we need this function? Now we can directly copy or like plug in this function into another code also. Now, next time, whenever we are doing an addition program, we don't need to write it again. We just can copy it and paste it anywhere. And the only thing is we just need to call that function. So only this part would change every time. So that's how advantages these functions are in Python. And whenever we are writing programs now going forward, we'll be mostly writing the programs. And whenever we write, we'll be always writing the program within a function. Like we'll use the functions, and inside these functions, rather than like just one single statement, we can use our for loops, if loops, while loops, and so on. So I think is everyone clear until this point? Because that's like almost end of theoretical session. Now next thing would be more towards like programming session. So is there any kind of doubt in terms of any understanding, or like do you want me to repeat anything? Since I am not getting any comments, so that means everyone understood.
Guys, at least comment,
Yes, sir, we
say
have.
something.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so
सुधांशु घाबरलास की काय तू सरांना बोलत नाहीस काही नाही.
नाही ना.
Okay.
okay, so I think that's the theoretical session. Now, the only additional session, what I want to like additional thing on top of this, I need to explain is indentation, which is like just a theoretical concept, uh, which we can like understand like in 2 minutes itself. So indentations are basically like if you see whenever I'm writing these functions of program, right? After every line here, you can see I'm providing some spaces like blank spaces here after this. So these are called as like indentations. And Python uses these indentation concept to understand like where my block of statements are starting, right? Because if you look here, I have this function, but how should Python know like what are the statements which are inside a function and what are the functions statements which are outside this function? So that's why we are using this indentation. So indentations are nothing but blank spaces which we provide within our program to understand like what are the block of statements which comes under a certain if loop or a function, right? Now here we are seeing this example. So print a comma b is inside, is having this indentation which is additional blank spaces. So that way Python understand like this statement is inside this function. But if you see a and b, these don't have any kind of spaces at the start. So that means these block of three statements is not part of this function. So that's how we understand how this indentation is. So this is just on a high level, what is this indentation? And we can always try to understand like when we write our next set of programs. So I think this covers almost all like theoretical concepts of our Python program. Now in our next session, we'll start working, like picking up some basic programs and utilize all these concepts. So we can wind up our session now. And I think so we have less than a minute where this session will go off. So
Okay.
let's continue our next session.
Fine. Thank you so much, sir.